Hey, happy Monday morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Just got over a allergy coughing spell here, so you'll have to excuse me. Anyway, it's so good to be back with you. Had to be gone some last week due to my wife having to undergo some more testing. We're confident everything is going to be just fine. And thank you so very, very much to so many of you for your wonderful private messages of concern and prayers. It really means a lot to us, and we do appreciate it. Well, we're involved in a study of the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15. And I've been sharing with you that Paul said the resurrection would be when the sting of sin, the sting of death, which is sin, would be overcome. I've shared with you the simple fact that what that means is if you deal with sin, you've dealt with death. If you overcome sin, you've overcome death. And it raises the question, and my goodness, at the wonderful comments I received over this, if the child of God is genuinely forgiven of our sin, we do not bear the guilt or the penalty of sin because we are forgiven, then it raises the legitimate question, why does the child of God who is forgiven of sin still have to die physically? Now, if you think I'm posing kind of a weird question, I'm not. Scholars have and do continue to struggle with that question. And I'm going to be addressing that question even more in upcoming videos, but keep asking yourself that question. If the child of God is forgiven of sin, if sin brings death, and again, if the child of God is forgiven of sin, has no sin through the blood of Christ, why does the child of God still die biologically if biological death is the result of sin? Simple question, but a profoundly important question. All right. Well, as I suggested to you, and as we began to develop over the last couple of videos, Romans chapters 5 through 8 are directly parallel to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians 15, as in Adam all men die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. Romans 5 to 8, wherefore as by one man, i.e. Adam, entered the world, so then death passed upon all men because all men sinned. These are directly parallel passages and chapters. What is absolutely abundantly clear, however, is that when Paul's discussing Adam, sin, and death in Romans 5 through 8, he is not dealing in any sense with physical death. So if Paul in Romans 5 to 8, which is directly parallel to 1 Corinthians 15, is not dealing with biological death and biological life, then that means that 1 Corinthians 15 is not dealing with biological death and biological resurrection. Look at what Paul says in Romans chapter 5, verse 12. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, therefore death passed upon all men because all men sinned. Now let's be really clear here. Paul does not say, I inherited sin or death from Adam. No, he said sin and death entered through Adam, but all men die, not because they are inheritors of Adam's sin. No, they die because they sin. In other words, Paul is saying every man recapitulates the story of Adam in his own life. He makes this abundantly clear in chapter 7 particularly, but not only chapter 7, in chapter 6, where he's even going to use the imagery, the direct imagery of fruit, sin, and death. If that's not the Adamic story, I don't know what it is. So let me reiterate here. Paul in Romans chapter 5 and verse 12 is saying that man recapitulates, every man recapitulates the story of Adam in his own life. Adam, here's the law of the garden, do not eat the forbidden fruit. Adam sinned, he died. Sin and death entered through that, entered into the world through Adam. Every man dies because every man sins. No sin, no death. Now, you got to think about this and you got to catch the power of this. If biological death is the death that entered when Adam and Eve sinned, the death that God said, in the day you eat, you will surely die, then that means that since every man recapitulates the story of Adam in their own life, that means I am not under the penalty of sin and death until I do sin. You catch that? You catch the power of that? Adam was not under the penalty of sin, i.e. death, until he sinned. So, consider this. If the sin of Adam, or excuse me, if the death of Adam brought immediate biological death, then that should mean that every single person, at the moment they sin, they die biologically. Well, you know what? Adam didn't die biologically the day he sinned. No one today sins, or excuse me, dies instantly the day they sin. And somebody says, well, yeah, you know, but Adam simply became mortal. He began to die. That's what God meant. You'll begin to die. Well, then that should mean that the moment a person sins, they become mortal. They become subject to death. Well, that's not going to work. How many times do we see infants dying, yet they are not guilty of sin? No, they did not inherit Adam's sin. They did not inherit Adam's guilt. Remember, all men die because all men sin, not because they inherit Adam's sin. So let me reiterate one more time. And look, let me reiterate. You just got to catch the power of this. If the death of Adam was the day you sin, you will become mortal, then that must mean that a person is not born mortal, subject to biological death, and they do not become subject to biological death until the day they sin. Folks, I'm telling you, biological death simply does not fit the story of Adam. And we've got more to prove this as we continue. Now, in the meantime, I want you to see about ordering this little book, The Last Enemy and the Triumph of Christ, by Daniel Rogers. Absolutely wonderful little book, easy to read, easy to understand. Go to my website, donkpreston.com or bibleprophecy.com, and order the book. When you order the book, be sure to send me a note saying that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I will include, free of charge, Preterism, a brief introduction by Brian Martin. Excellent, excellent little introduction to covenant eschatology. All right, you do not want to miss, as we continue our investigation and our study of Romans 5 through 8 as it relates to 1 Corinthians 15 and the death of Adam. We will see you on the flip side.